So by now, I'm sure that you've heard about Bill Maher's newest segment where he demonizes trans children and sides pretty explicitly with conservatives on this particular issue. Now, the reason why this 9-minute long segment bothered me so much is because I know that Bill Maher knows better. I've lost faith in him. I'm no longer a fan of Bill Maher after being previously a huge fan of him. But you know that he knows better because he sprinkles in tidbits of logic and reason throughout the course of this entire clip. But the problem is that he ultimately sides with conservatives, with TERFs here, and he makes a transphobic argument. And the reason why I think that he's doing this, even if deep down he knows it's wrong, is because he wants to pander to his new pals on the right. In fact, Marjorie Taylor Greene took to Twitter to thank him for this particular segment. Fox News decided to praise Bill Maher for doing another transphobic segment, this time being more explicit. So that's probably why he's doing it, but I'm not necessarily sure what his motivations are, and really, I don't care. What he's doing here is disingenuous, it's deceitful, and it's factually incorrect. Now, the segment itself is 9 minutes long, so I can't possibly react to all of it, but there's a couple of moments that I really want to highlight in particular that stood out to me because of how deceptive he's being. Here's the first.
And finally, new rule: if something about the human race is changing at a previously unprecedented rate, we have to at least discuss it. Broken down over time, the LGBT population of America seems to be roughly doubling every generation. According to a recent Gallup poll, less than 1% of Americans born before 1946, that's Joe Biden's generation, identify that way. 2.6% of boomers do, 4.2% of Gen X, 10.5% of millennials, and 20.8% of Gen Z, which means if we follow this trajectory, we will all be gay in 2054. And then who's going to buy this chair? I'm just saying that when things change this much, this fast, people are allowed to ask, what's up with that?
So, first of all, he sounds the alarm about how many people are identifying as LGBTQ+. Now, the only reason why you think that this is bad is if you think that being gay or being trans is bad. It's an argument rooted in homophobia because, oh my God, if more people are gay, that's very clearly bad, right? But ask yourself why this is happening. Is being LGBTQ+ some sort of contagious disease? Or is it the case that times are changing and society is changing and each subsequent generation is getting more and more accepting and affirming of their LGBTQ+ peers? Therefore, gay and trans people really don't feel the need to hide in the closet. I mean, we know that he knows this argument because later on in the segment, he says, yes, obviously it's the case that, you know, society is becoming more accepting, but yet he still plays dumb and makes it seem as if, oh my God, what's going on here? Well, we can look back to history to explain this current moment, the history of left-handedness, and you've seen this chart before if you've watched my content. So between the 1880s and the 1900s, the rate of left-handedness was going down. Now let's just pause for a moment right there. Why was the rate of left-handed people going down? Well, it was because society was demonizing people who were left-handed. Not only was it inconvenient to specifically manufacture tools for left-handed people, that was just an extra cost for a small percentage of the population, but there were also individuals who were extremists and they ascribed actual supernatural traits to left-handed people. They were seen as being evil, demonic, and doing witchcraft. So people were afraid to come out and be themselves and use their left hand. Therefore, they kind of went into the closet. But slowly but surely, times began to change. So let's go back to that chart. Left-handedness increased by 2% between 1900 and 1920. However, between 1920 and 1940, when things really started to change, culturally speaking, well, the number of left-handed people exploded in the same way that the number of LGBTQ+ people is exploding right now. But as of the 1960s, the number of left-handed people plateaued, and we just found out the true number of left-handed people. It's about 12% of the population, and the reason why we found out that true number was because left-handed people, they were no longer demonized. Now, we're in that 1920 to 1940 period right now for LGBTQ+ people. As more and more people feel comfortable being themselves, the numbers will go up, but eventually it will plateau and we'll find out the true number of LGBTQ+ people. to suggest, and he was being facetious here, but to suggest that at the rate we're going, everyone will be gay by 2050 or something. I mean, to say that you're stupid. And he's saying this being half serious, but he knows that right-wingers have made this argument, but unironically. So he's pandering to them once again. So obviously it's the case that people are going to come out if it's no longer demonized, if being trans or gay isn't as stigmatized. But Bill Maher plays dumb here because he wants to appeal to his reactionary audience. Here's another clip.
And it's okay to ask questions about something that's very new and involves children. The answer can't always be that anyone from a marginalized community is automatically right, trump card, mic drop, end of discussion. Because we're literally experimenting on children. Maybe that's why Sweden and Finland have stopped giving puberty blockers to kids, because we just don't know much about the long-term effects. Although common sense should tell you that when you reverse the course of raging hormones, there's going to be problems. We do know it hinders the development of bone density, which is kind of important if you like having a skeleton. Fertility and the ability to have an orgasm seem also to be affected. This isn't just a lifestyle decision, it's medical. Weighing trade-offs is not bigotry. Yet when a book questioning the sudden uptick in transitioning children was released, a trans lawyer with the ACLU named Chase Strangio tweeted, "Stopping the circulation of this book and these ideas is 100% a hill I will die on." How very civil liberties of him. Chase, by the way, has just been named one of the grand marshals of this year's New York City Pride March, along with 3 other trans people and a lesbian. What's missing here? Oh, right, a gay man. That's where we are now. Gay men aren't hip enough for the gay pride parade.
Now, I could be wrong, but I actually thought that Chase Strangio was a gay man. In fact, he tweeted out, "I have a lot of reactions to the Bill Maher segment, but why does he assume I am not a gay man?" Yeah, and the reason why Bill Maher is, again, probably playing dumb here is because, I mean, there's a deliberate reason for this. It's inconceivable to him and transphobes that if you are, a trans man or a trans woman, you could be attracted to the same gender, because in their view, trans identity doesn't necessarily exist. Someone who is trans is just really, really gay in their opinion. So if you're, for example, born with a penis and you transition and you become a woman, well, that's because you're just more gay than cis gay men in their view. So, of course, you're going to opt for men. But the thing is that actually in the trans community, there are a lot of gay people. A lot of gay people. But the reason why they say this, and J.K. Rowling says this as well, is to basically delegitimize the existence of trans people. Maybe you're not trans, maybe you're just gay. And he says this pretty explicitly. For example,
maybe the boy who thinks he's a girl is just gay. Or whatever Frasier was.
Yeah, so the argument is you're not really trans, you're just super gay, except that's not how things work. I knew that I was gay from a very young age, probably the age of 5. Like, I didn't know that I was gay, but looking back, I can remember, oh, okay, that was me acknowledging my identity back then. But I never had an issue with gender identity. I had an issue with my sexual orientation, right? Or I didn't have the issue myself per se, but society had an issue with that. But what transphobes want to do is muddy the waters and blend gender dysphoria and, gender identity and sexual orientation. But these are different things. Just because somebody is trans doesn't mean that they can't be attracted to their same gender, but the reason why people like Bill Maher do this is to delegitimize trans existence. Now, he also said that Finland and Sweden banned puberty blockers. Now, we can look to Finland and Sweden for a lot of things. I love that they have more worker protections, a higher social safety net. I like that they have healthcare for everyone, but just because they get a lot of things right doesn't mean that they're incapable of getting things wrong. And in this instance, they got it really, really wrong. Giving puberty blockers to your child, having your kid socially transition, this is a decision that is made with the child, their doctor, and the parent. And not everyone is going to choose to make this choice for their child. Not every child who's trans or gender nonconforming will want to actually do this. But it's really important that they have that choice. And it's astonishing that I have to explain this when we're all talking about the pro-choice argument again. This is a decision that is made between the kid, the parent, and their doctors. Now, to suggest that puberty blockers should be banned across the board, he says, well, look, there are side effects. And he's correct. There are some long-term side effects, but he's not looking at the entire picture. So the Mayo Clinic explains that side effects include weight gain, headaches, there's other potential side effects with respect to fertility issues, but there are positives. It could improve mental well-being, reduce depression and anxiety, and even reduce thoughts or actions related to self-harm. And in order to get puberty blockers, an adolescent must have a history of intense gender dysphoria. So you're not just going to go into a doctor on a Tuesday and say, hey, my kid just said they're transgender, where's the puberty blockers? That's not what's actually happening. It is a very complex thing. And there's history there. There's medical history. There's, therapy sessions involved. This is a complicated thing that a doctor, a parent, and a child is going to agree upon. But Bill Maher is saying you should take away that choice. And to really show you that he's transphobic, it stems from the fact that he's not worried about other really, potential side effects to other medications that young people are prescribed. For example, when I was young, I was prescribed Prozac because I had a severe case of obsessive compulsive disorder. I was diagnosed when I was 5 years old, and my parents didn't really even consider giving me medicine until I was an adolescent, because that's when it really got bad, and it was debilitating. Like, I couldn't live a normal life, literally. So my parents decided to seek out medication. Now, there are side effects with these types of medications. In fact, my family, they gave my parents hell because they were giving me Prozac at a young age. And, one of the Columbine shooters apparently was on Prozac. I'm not sure if this is true, but this is what they said. And so they thought, oh my God, you're giving him this medication. It's going to turn him into a violent animal. He's going to do a school shooting. Why would you do this to him? And, it's because my parents, they weighed out the pros and cons with my doctor and myself. My parents thought, you know what, there are potential side effects, but I think that the pros outweigh the cons. And my dad was never someone who wanted to give me medication. I mean, at a young age, he told me that he believed that I was actually faking having OCD. He said that it's all in my head and I was doing it for attention. I heard these conversations with my mom, but when he saw, when I was like the age of 10, 11, 12, that I couldn't live life, literally, like I couldn't leave home, my OCD was that crippling and debilitating, he thought, okay, it's clear that this is not an act. He's not doing this to himself. He's miserable. He's a shell of his former self. So as a parent, I'm going to intervene and I want to protect my child. So my parents made that decision, and I'm glad that they did, because that decision drastically reduced my obsessive compulsive disorder. And I basically was able to live a relatively normal life by the time I was 15 or 16. But if my parents couldn't make that decision, I don't know how I would have been at this point today, where my obsessive compulsive disorder exists, but it's more manageable. I don't know. Perhaps that trajectory would have been the same regardless, but I'm not sure. But I'm really thankful that my parents were able to make that decision. But Bill Maher is implying here, we should take that decision away from parents with trans kids. They're the only ones who I think the cons outweigh the pros when it comes to medication that they could potentially be prescribed. Except you don't know their situation. Maybe the medical side effects, the physical side effects, aren't as bad as the mental agony that they're in because they're forced to live as a gender that they do not identify as. Maybe the risk of suicide is so high that parents think, I don't care about the side effects. Medical intervention right now is necessary to save my child's life. It is a deeply, deeply personal thing that should be left up to doctors and patients. And Bill Maher is saying, nope, I want to take away that choice just for trans people. I don't care about the other medications that kids and adolescents are prescribed. Just when it comes to trans people, puberty blockers, that's like the worst thing. This is bigotry. It is deeply, deeply rooted in bigotry. Now, I've got one more clip that I want to show you. So he's going to push an argument that right-wing conservatives and TERFs have made that I've talked about on this channel, but now he's saying it when I think he probably knows better.
Yes, part of the rise in LGBT numbers is from people feeling free enough to tell it to a pollster, and that's all to the good. But some of it is, it's trendy. Penis equals man? Okay, boomer. Remember, the prime directive of every teen is anything to shock and challenge the squares who brought you up. It's why nobody gets a nose ring at 56. And if you haven't noticed that with kids, doing something for the likes is more important than their own genitals, you haven't been paying attention. Dr. Erica Anderson is a prominent 71-year-old clinical psychologist who is herself transgender and who now says, I think it's gone too far. The LA Times summarizes, she's come to believe that some children identifying as trans are falling under the influence of their peers and social media. If you attend a small dinner party of typically very liberal, upper-income Angelenos, it is not uncommon to hear parents who each have a trans kid having a conversation about that. What are the odds of that happening in Youngstown, Ohio? If this spike in trans children is all natural, why is it regional? Either Ohio is shaming them or California is creating them. It's like that day we suddenly all needed bottled water all the time. If we can't admit that in certain enclaves there is some level of trendiness to the idea of being anything other than straight, then this is not a serious science-based discussion. It's a blow being struck in the culture wars using children as cannon fodder.
Okay, first of all, who's pushing this as a culture war issue, Bill? Gender-affirming care for trans youth is something that has existed basically everywhere in this country for quite some time until conservatives decided to make this an issue and start banning it in various states. And they're the ones using kids as a political football, as political fodder, not the parents who are seeking out care for their trans children. The fact that he said that is so disgusting. Now also, if there's less trans kids in Ohio than there are in California, I mean, is it trendy? I mean, culture varies. Some states are going to be more accepting than other states. The fact that he would say this, but also concede the fact that, societal acceptance also is going to weigh in here, it shows you that he knows better, and he's just being deceitful, purposefully so. He's being purposefully obtuse to appease his right-wing audience, and it's really disgusting to see. Now, finally, he makes this claim that is so infuriating because he says it's trendy, right? He even cites a trans psychologist who says, look, we've gone too far. Okay, listen, if you're going to make this argument, J.K. Rowling makes this argument, other people have made this argument on the right. If you're going to make this argument, what do you have to prove? You have to provide us with evidence that there is a very high rate of detransitions. If it's trendy, then you're going to see a lot of detransitions. So what is the detransition rate? Well, luckily for us, a new study was just released at the beginning of this month. As the New York Times explains, young children who transition to a new gender with social changes, taking on new names, pronouns, haircuts, and clothing, are likely to continue identifying as that gender 5 years later, according to a report published on Wednesday, the first study of its kind. The data come from the Trans Youth Project, a well-known effort following 317 children across the United States and Canada who underwent a so-called social transition between ages 3 and 12. Participants transitioned on average at the age of 6.5. The vast majority of the group still identified with their new gender 5 years later, according to the study, and many had begun hormonal medications in adolescence to prompt biological changes to align with their gender identities. The study found that 2.5% of the group had reverted to identifying as the gender they were assigned at birth. In other words, the overwhelming majority of trans children in the first long-term study like this, they are trans. It's not a trend. The detransition rate is 2.5%. 2.5%. So where's the rampant detransitions that suggest that this is trendy? How many children grow out of being trans who showed signs when they were very young? If you talk to adult trans people, they say they showed signs at a very young age, sometimes the ages of 2 or 3. So Bill Maher is saying, wow, it's trendy. Maybe it's societal, maybe it's innate in some instances, but you've got to admit there's a portion of it that's trendy. Okay, let's just claim that the 2.5% who detransitioned are doing it because of trendiness. Well, it doesn't seem like a very rampant issue. It seems like it's statistically insignificant. And to even say that it's trendy is incredibly stupid because trans people currently are fighting to survive. It is demonized in every state, even blue states. I mean, it's not necessarily going to be stigma-free if you come out as trans. So how is it trendy? I mean, to say this is incredibly out of touch and stupid. Like, you don't know what trans people go through, but yet you say this. But Bill Maher, he knows better, and yet he still says this anyway, because he's too far gone now. When you're rich and you're out of touch and you surround yourself with people who just affirm your bad beliefs, then yeah, that's going to happen. And he had like Adam Carolla on the panel with him, who is a massive conservative. So, you know, this is Bill Maher now. He's knowingly lying at the behest of his right-wing pals just so he can score some brownie points with them, I guess. I mean, I don't know why he's doing this either way. It's disgusting, and he knows he's lying. And, you know, I hope that he can live with himself, because what he's doing is demonizing an entire community that currently is just fighting to survive, but the right is making that really, really difficult. In Texas, for example, any parent who seeks out gender-affirming care for their child is going to be investigated as if they're child abusers. You know, Bill Maher could focus on that, but instead he's focusing on the trendy trans people who transition and detransition all the time, as if this is some sort of a widespread phenomenon. No, it's disappointing, but not surprising for Bill Maher at this point.